The Open Therapy Institute is addressing bias in mental health care. Go to our website, opentherapyinstitute.org. We have CE credit workshops about overlooked issues in the field. You can go to our workshop page and register now and become a member. And for those looking for a therapist, we match people with someone who's highly skilled and truly open. Just contact us through the contact page on the website or email us at info@opentherapyinstitute.org. Hi, I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce, and I'm speaking with Dr. Andrew Hartz of the Open Therapy Institute. And I don't even know what number we're on right now for our podcast series, but it's been a great series of discussions, and I'm glad to be able to speak with you today.
Good to talk to you too.
Thanks. I was listening back to a conversation that the two of us had 2 recordings ago, and we were talking about DEI and about how there's kind of been a shift in how people are able to challenge some of the ideas that were difficult to challenge. And now we're finally at a place where it feels like we can start to have more nuanced and deep discussions without quite as much self-censorship and sort of the total political shutdown of challenging some of the diversity, equity, inclusion, ideological pressures that have been going on professionally. And at the end of that conversation, it's kind of like halfway through, you brought up something that was like, well, here's one example. And it was men's issues, like masculinity issues, the repression of masculinity, the sort of discrimination against men, and how this impacts individuals and culture. And I really liked that conversation. We sort of like, we didn't get a chance to really get into it as deeply as we could have. And there's so many threads that we could have picked up on just within that one topic. But I was thinking about this because the other day for a Solid Ground live stream, which is a live stream we do each Monday, and most of my colleagues that join me for that are women, we were talking about some issues that are more particular to women. And it's interesting to me that in online dialogues about these things, it's so hard to talk about these issues. And I think part of that is because when you say something like men and women, you're talking about such vast groups with so much variation within them that it's almost as meaningless as the woke dialogue around race. And yet there are ways in which we are all impacted by not only our biology, but the cultural attitudes towards sex and relationship and gender and things.
Right.
And so there's realities that need to be talked about, but at the same time, the broad stereotypes just don't do them justice. So anyway, I'm just sort of thinking about this generally, like the difficulty of engaging in these kinds of dialogues, but also the necessity of them. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I'm actually curious if I can ask a follow-up question about what if you could say a little bit about the specific women's issues that you were discussing.
Okay, sure. Yeah. This is so the specific issue that we raise, you and I were both at the ARC conference in London last week, and there was and one of the other women that I was speaking with, Jenny Holland, she was also at that conference. And so we were talking about some of the themes that came up. And one of the themes that ARC, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, is trying to promote is a pro-natalist policy and culture where they're concerned about the drop in the birth rate and also the increasingly later age at which people tend to first start families. So the number of kids per family is lower than it's ever been in Western culture, and we just see the demographic shift and the birth rate drop. And so they're talking a lot about this. And Jordan Peterson is one of the big promoters of ARC. He's one of the organizers. And one of the things that he talks about quite a bit is the impact of women's entry into public institutions on public life, on culture, and on policy. He specifically often talks about childless women and wants to talk about how this contributes to the problems that we see with like safetyism and you can kind of think about this archetype of a woman who has no kids but goes into teaching and
Mhm.
then sort of you know over like with this toxic empathy kind of relationship with her students gets in the way of her students development and even in the way of the parents authority. So he's kind of promoting these ideas of the longhouse being a problem, women run institutions, women's um, temperamental and I guess social impact on a lot of the problems that we're all trying to describe and understand.
Mm.
And so in talking with the women in the group that I was speaking with on Monday, there were just lots of different themes that came up throughout that, like childless women. Why is this a trend? Why do we see more women not having babies, not becoming
Right.
mothers? And
Right.
what does that mean for their personal development? So there are three women that I was speaking with who have not had kids and have, reached an age at which they won't be having children,
Right.
all talked about the problem of not ever having found a partner that would have been a suitable person to raise kids with, that all of them would have liked to have had that opportunity in life, but
Right.
never were able to make it happen because of the lack of a good supportive partner.
Yeah.
And so this is just a heartfelt experience that is anecdotally being shared by three different
Right.
individuals. And yet when you start to talk about these themes, you get a lot of, well, not me, that's not true for me, or men who feel attacked by these women uh, talking about their experience with men who weren't supportive to them, and vice versa. And I think men feel very attacked a lot of times when we talk about issues that impact women. Women feel attacked when we talk about issues that impact men. And I feel like there's just been such a massive public degradation of sex relations.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that. It's like we get to this point where we don't even know what a man and a woman is anymore, and then we fight about how to relate to each other. And I'm just kind of curious
Yeah.
what all
Yeah.
your thoughts are.
I mean, my initial reaction to this is like it seems like it's like a failure to think holistically.
Mhm.
Like there's this like focus on like I can think about this group or this group, but I can't really like what's the vision for how this is supposed to work that's going to like work for everyone. Um, I think that's really what's needed. But it's like
Mhm.
I think like with a lot of the changes with feminism and their scope is very partial.
Mhm.
I think that's true throughout the social justice movement. They're like, we're going to look at just this group. We're not going to think about anything else. We're just looking, they're very like narrow in scope. And so like the prototypical thing here is like men are getting 40% of BAs and the feminist movement is most concerned with the one area of academia where men are overrepresented, which is STEM,
STEM.
and trying to discriminate against men in STEM until they're a
Mhm.
minority there too. And this is seen as such a loving and good and just thing for them to
Mhm.
do. And there's a total disavowal of the aggression that's
Mhm.
it's like both in ignoring the every area where men are underrepresented and in attacking men for having more of an interest or ability in this one area.
Mhm.
And those movements they're always framed as if you'd have to be a horrible person not to support these initiatives. And the people who do it think that they're the best people who've ever
Mhm.
lived. For the most part, they think they're heroes. And there's a total an awareness of all the people they're attacking and all the people they're abandoning. And it's really easy to see like, how men, like I think with something like that, just like thinking about the men, just how demoralizing it is to men to know that if men ever are disproportionately doing well at anything, that's never seen as a strength for them. That's always seen as proof that they're bad sexists who need to be
Mhm.
attacked, discriminated against. And so, what do you do in that context as a male? Like, it's like a lot of them are going to disengage, a lot of them are going to be infantilized, a lot of them are going to become antisocial. And then women are going to say, where are all the good men?
Mhm.
and there is something that is, if it's framed the wrong way, I think it was Oprah, maybe Oprah and Michelle Obama together were like telling men to do better. I don't know if you
Mm.
remember this.
Oh
Men, do
gosh.
better,
Yeah.
do better. And it's kind of like, well, if we do better, that's seen as proof that we're sexist and privileged and therefore need to be discriminated against. So we're forbidden from doing better.
Hmm.
And like that's part of the problem. And we're not allowed to like even just the idea of what do dads do?
Hmm.
That is of value. Like we can't even say that masculinity or fatherhood or men, we can't even say what it is
Hmm.
that they offer because women could do that too.
Hmm.
And women can do that just as well, if not better. And so there's this total inability to describe a positive vision of a male role or male strengths. And it leads to a lot of women feel like it leads to alienation and antisocial behavior in men. And I think a lot of anger and resentment and thwarted masculinity and
Hmm.
emasculation. And it creates all of these terrible problems. And then I think if you don't look at the full picture, then women are kind of like, oh man, men are so immature, they're not good enough, they're not as, what, and it can be another attack on men that they're kind of like systematically like cut out from all these scholarships and support and things that women get, and then discriminated against, and then criticized for failing. And I think it's been going on, I think getting worse and worse, and this past decade's been pretty bad, but it's been getting worse my whole life,
Hmm.
for sure, this trend. And it's built into a ton of resentment.
Hmm.
Um, we have like another thing that I think is related to it is like we don't have a culture where we're able to talk about dynamics like this in a mature way. Like I think for a long time, maybe that's shifting a little bit now, but even talking about things like this was seen as sexist and therefore unacceptable. And I think one thing that happens when people can't talk about these things is it's all going to come out sideways. It's going to come out in personal aggressions and insults and trolling or whatever, and like it's all going to come out sideways in a non-constructive way, and then people are going to be acting this thing out and they're confused about why it's happening and things are going to feel crazy because we've prevented ourselves from being able to talk about it. So um but I think like in a way, like at least the issue that you're describing with these women and what we're talking about, the issues with men, they seem like in some ways like the same issue. Like they're both related to like our society's attitude around gender and sexuality is not working for people,
Hmm.
male or female. And we need to think about a vision of how this works that really will work for people. And the complaint really is in some ways like the same.
Hmm.
But the conversation is so I think counterproductive or ineffective because um,
Because it's blame oriented.
it's blame oriented, it's partial, and people are, when the dialogue gets suppressed, it just degenerates.
Hmm.
It's like, why is our political, it's like, same for our entire political discourse. Like, we forbid certain things for a long time. It was really socially prohibited to even say like immigration has costs
Hmm.
or risks associated with it.
Hmm.
That was seen as unacceptably racist to
Hmm.
even talk about that. And to an extent, it still is. So that ensures that the immigration debate is going to be chaotic and immature
Hmm.
because we can't talk about it. And it's like that with race, obviously, and like a ton of other issues. And this is like one too. But it's like we're not, and I think there is a kind of like there's so much anger from the brokenness of our current system around gender and sexuality. It's like, um, do we, it doesn't, it's more about hurting the other side than about like trying to figure out a way to fix it because everybody's like hurt and angry at this point.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that that's well said. I also wonder how much of these problems are problems of scale. I know I've said this before, but when you're trying to manage people from such a remove, or you're thinking about people as a manageable force or a a vast population, it's really hard to hear human experience and human real issues. I guess if you talk to people in real life, like friends and family members, and talk about how they're experiencing a lot of these issues in their life, you'll hear individual stories that are harder to aggregate into these greater themes. You might hear some of these themes reflected, but you also hear people not having quite the problem with them that we see when we talk about them at the academic level or when we see it displayed on social media. Sort of themes about think about like the red pill men's the manosphere, and you hear men are this, and then the online feminist move groups who talk about gender issues in a very specific way. If you only pay attention to that, and what I saw reflected in my graduate education was really similar. It was kind of like this is a distillation of these themes that you see when you're in a, a an environment that encourages stereotyping and broad
Right.
strokes
Right.
viewpoints rather than actual individual recognition. So I wonder how much of these issues are really issues of the scale at which we're trying to understand humanity.
I definitely, well, that's interesting. I mean, one thing that came to mind, it's a little bit different, but one thing that I think is like I've started to think more and more about these issues, the social justice discourse in general, and like, but related to gender too, is I think that something is changing a little bit that I see on the left. It's not as much like, we have to ruin your life for talking about these issues. But there is a lot of like mocking and validation. Like, there is a lot of like, oh yeah, white people have it so rough, boo hoo, and men have it so hard. Yeah, that's right. And there is this kind of like sarcastic mocking and validation that I think has a lot of malice in it.
Mhm.
Um, just to kind of say like I think the undertone is like you're in the privileged oppressor group. I don't need to give a fuck about when you're mistreated.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
dumb to think that I should care because I don't, because you're the privileged oppressor. And like, yeah, really, you really think white people are the issue, that that's something that we need to care about. It's like, well, I think we need to care about everybody.
Mhm.
Is that such a is that such a crazy thought? And to
Mhm.
them, it's like, yeah, we have to care. There's a lot of eye rolling, kind of sarcastic, mocking, and validation attitude. And I
Mhm.
think that is progress, believe it or not, like from
Mhm.
where we were to 5 years ago. But there's still more to go. And it does mirror like why the dialogue isn't working.
Mhm.
It's like that I can't even like talk about any of this and like have a not get something that's just like a mocking, insulting
Mhm.
rating response. It's
Mhm.
pretty, but I definitely think that's more the left's stance on it
Mhm.
currently than
Then the confident
the idea of you are Hitler and you really do I
mhm.
really need to ruin your life and threaten you because it's more like it has more of this like sarcastic, I think, invalidating
Mhm.
attitude towards people that are concerned about these issues. Um, there is something to be said for like broad social norms. Like I really like we could use a cultural structure that enables women to have kids during their birthing years. Like, I just think about like the psychologists where it's like, okay, you go to undergrad, you do this, you go to grad school, you're done at 35. So
Right.
either you're trying to be a mom while you're doing this intense grad school work, or
Mhm.
you're going late. And what's your career supposed to look like? I think it's like the idea that we could have more careers that were tracked for women to complete their coursework on something that was aligned with their biological clock and potentially working part-time for periods of their life where then they don't give up their entire career, but like have like but but that would kind of imply like female career tracks.
I may I say this? I think that this is I'm glad you brought this up because when we were at that conference and they're all talking about bringing the birth rate up and how people should be having kids at a younger age, one of the things that I kept thinking is we have our education system is a complete racket. Like people used to graduate high school with some basic skills that they could get a decent job, and they had some good education. They'd learned some useful things about how to engage economically with the world. At this point,
Right.
a high school education is pretty garbage. And you have to plan on a bachelor's degree, which used to be a 3 year degree, but now it's on average a 5 to 6 year degree. And then you add, even with a bachelor's degree, you can't do a lot of things. So you really do need a graduate degree or some postgraduate training at least. And so now you're looking at, in order to feel like you've done something of worth or even made the expenses of your college tuition worth it, you're investing so many years in your education that you are in your 30s before you can reasonably expect to start settling down and getting some stability under you. I think that if you want to see the birth rate go up, you have to make a high school education worth something again and allow, if you want 25-year-olds having babies, you need 18-year-olds that can have real jobs. You just need
Right,
that. And
right,
so
right,
for women, yeah, women you see that pressure manifest more with women because they have a narrower window of fertility.
right,
Men's
right,
window of fertility lasts so much longer that those impacts on their lives are not as immediately evident, but it's still evident. It still shows up in when you have a lot of guys who are in their 30s who still don't feel like they've done anything. They still don't
well,
feel like they've
right,
made
yeah.
anything of their life.
You get done with, even if you're pretty organized, motivated person, like, you can get done with law school and you're 30. I mean, that's not bad,
Mhm.
I mean, like, and because you don't want to like you do want to have some life
Yeah, but
experience.
in law
Like,
school, I mean, I went
what?
to law school. They don't let you hold a job. You have to
Right,
petition the
right,
school to allow you to work while you're in school. So the fact that you're,
right, right, right,
if I was on a presidential scholarship when I was in law school and had a lot of my tuition paid, but it was still really expensive beyond what the scholarship offered. And
right,
there wasn't any way that just, there's so many barriers to these things to allow a person to come through at a reasonably young age where they can have both a career that's meaningful and they're not just doing something that they find no purpose in and no inspiration in at all. And
right,
everybody wants purpose and inspiration, men and women. So we
right,
have to have an avenue to achieve careers that make us feel like we're special to the people around us and we mean something in this life. Motherhood alone, um, it's the sad thing is that that's just really not enough for most women. When you're a mom and you're a stay-home mom, it's fairly isolating unless you're lucky enough to figure out how to have a good community around you. And there's a lot of pressures on stay-at-home moms too, because a lot of times dads are struggling to make it work on one income. And he
right,
really needs his wife to be an economic participant in the family. So a lot of stay-at-home moms aren't just sitting around, taking care of house and home and children. They also have to have some kind of part-time job at least. So you got all these, it's quite a difficult thing to start a family as a young person.
yeah. And there may be like, and it's also like, so I think the economics and the education is part of it, that's
Mhm.
like not lined up to work. And I don't think like a lot of these interventions that I see, it's like tax credits or something. I don't think that they're really doing that much.
Mhm.
But I think that a lot of this is like more cultural, and it does like there are some like painful realities hitting for people that are an opportunity to learn a lesson about like we have to figure out other ways to do this. And but part of it too is like the sexual culture and how much people just kind of like waste a lot of time in relationships that they expect to go nowhere. I
Mhm.
think that has like a lot to do with that's such a it's weird to not dedicate tons of your life to relationships that you don't value. Like it seems like it's like normative to do a lot of like pointless dating or like superficial dating or like sex that's not meaningful. Like it's like I mean I think it's different in different parts of the country, but it's like it's crazy how much that's like an expectation of like a normal part of life. And it's yeah, it just eats up, and I think it can do a lot of damage. There's on the other hand, just one more piece, and then it's like there is one thing that was really interesting because I used to teach developmental psychology, and there was two parts to it. There was like child, and then there was adult.
Mhm.
And we did a whole unit that was like from emerging adulthood through old age. And
Mhm.
that was the class. And it was a great class to teach. But one thing that it hit home is as people are living longer, a marriage is like a bigger commitment. So if you want to have kids in your 20s and you're getting married in your early 20s and you're living to your 80s, that is, that's more like if you go back to the Middle Ages or whenever people are thinking when people had their kids in their 20s, they weren't
They were
not
living
everybody.
to like their late 30s.
Yeah, it's like it was like a 20-year thing.
Mhm.
And now it's like, or maybe look forward, but it's like it's a bigger commitment.
Mhm.
And it's like I don't think a lot of people have the maturity to like know enough about themselves to kind of make those commitments at that age, in a way that really works with who they are. Some people have different person temperaments, and some people can
Mhm.
make, but I think part of it is like being mature enough, to make a commitment like that with somebody. Um,
Well, Esther Perel, who's a pretty famous popular psychologist, she talks about this. She says that most people today in this modern age will have 2 to 3 marriages, whether they actually get married legally or not.
right,
We have
right,
about 2 to 3 marriages, sometimes to the same person, is how she puts it, because she's talking
mm,
about that developmental arc over your
right,
lifetime that you really are going through massive changes in your own personal development. And maybe you can do that with one person that you've been committed to for your whole adult life, but a lot of times not. So we have this kind of serial monogamy. And I think that people who want to promote monogamy or who think of that as an ideal don't like that idea. I certainly don't think that that's, if I were to just describe what's best, I wouldn't declare that to be the thing, but we can have an ideal and then we can have what is. And sometimes
right,
looking at what is just really important to be able to describe it. And if you are going to look at life as from onset of adulthood till death at like 75 or whatever age we now expect to live to, 80, as a really long time to spend with just one person, and so there's a lot of pressure on that coupling, that mating decision. Is it better to just think, well, I'm going to spend it in an attempt to make one deep, long-lasting relationship, but if that doesn't work out, I'll make peace with that and I'll have a series of 2 or 3 really deep, long-lasting relationships?
right,
Or is it I'm just going to screw around because there's no hope of finding that right person anyway? And I kind of come back to educational inflation as a real core social problem that I think I don't hear anybody talking about this. The
no,
amount of fluff that we've added to our average bachelor's degree, for instance, it's so
right,
full of stuff that is like opportunistically inserted in there in order to bulk up the program of education to make more money for people. Because
right,
and there's not a lot of consumer pushback, because to those students, they're really young, they're signing on the dotted line for their loan, it's kind of monopoly money to them, they don't really get it.
right,
And if this is what I
right,
have to do in order to come out the end with a degree, then I'm going to do that. But I think one of the byproducts of that is that thing that you're describing, and it's that it's an extended adolescence when you're not taking relationships seriously either, because the world isn't taking you very seriously. So you move out of your parents' home and you're 17, 18, whatever it is, and then you go off to college, and you're you're not seen as a responsible autonomous entity. You're still seen kind of as a kid. You're in this hybrid kid space. And what I witnessed when I went back to college later. I was a single mom, and I was in my late 20s when I went back to college. And it was amazing to me. I was at this university that had a real big party culture. It was like Greek life, they called it. And it was their like sororities and fraternities. And it was effortless almost to be a big fish in a small pond there because I was the only one doing my work. I'm like the only one really reading this stuff, and I'm engaging with the teachers and I'm asking the questions, and suddenly all these people want me to tutor them. And, I'm like getting a fellowship to do research. And it was because it wasn't it was a lack of care and effort on the part of these young people who were more about screwing around with each other, going out drinking, and
Right.
living this campus lifestyle. And this is when I started to see the inflation of education as a real force that is not being taken seriously
Right.
by people looking at the social culture.
That's so interesting. And another thing like also to like throw in here with like this whole problem is like dating apps.
Mhm.
I think it's like they have some overlap in terms of how they feel with like Instagram or other things where it's like, I think it's really easy to be like, okay, well, this person has this one thing that I kind of like, but then this other person has this other thing that I kind of like. So who's
Yeah.
the right thing? And then you're kind of in this, I think they kind of can very easily breed like an indecisiveness of like, what is it that you're looking for? I don't know how people quite find like how most people find like guidance of like, how do you decide like this is the right person?
Mhm.
Um,
It's
because it's
weird too.
like
It's human
it's
shopping.
weird. It's human shopping, and they're shopping for you, and you're shopping for them. And if you're too intellectual about it, like it's like, oh, like I don't know, and it's not a great way to meet. Like it's not like you don't want that to be your story. It's like, oh, I was like shopping for humans, and then I picked you off the shelf, and it was fine. I think it's like
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But like so I don't know how people do it. And then it seems like it can easily eat away at people where it's like, oh, like I'm having a problem in my relationship, but if I just went on the app, there'd be like a thousand more
Mm.
humans and I could pick a different
Right.
human. And who would
Right.
that what would them? It's like, oh my God, like
It's
I don't
this
know how you live.
interchangeability, right?
Yeah, and like you have to attach or somehow like make meaning with somebody or recognize a connection that's deeper or more meaningful. And if you're dating and you're on these apps long enough, I think it can get harder and harder
Mhm.
to be like, oh, but maybe I could do better with this or like I don't know. It's just like so I think but all of these issues, it's like they're kind of like monumental challenges. They're incredibly daunting, but I do think it's like helpful just to like be thinking about the problem. And one thing that I don't like, and I think this might be s- potentially the worst part of the way this discourse makes its way online or in the news is it's their first impulse is like tax policy or like a
Mm.
thing.
Government.
Like I think it's worth thinking about this as more like a cultural psychological thing, where that might even be a way that a lot of these issues get fixed, as opposed to like if we just like tax incentivize people to like we'll just pay you to have lots of babies when you're 25. I'm like, I don't know that that's really what we want. Like being like, oh, do you want to have a baby and we can like get this tax credit together? I don't know.
Yeah.
It just it so I think no, not that everything related to tax policy is stupid or that I'm not even necessarily opposed to those credits. I'm not at all. But
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
but just to say like I think like the psychological cultural piece seems to me to be the bigger piece. And like how do we think about this coming together? Like I think there is a potential for like thinking about cultural paradigms that we could strive for that are not what we have, which I think is dysfunctional. And I think it doesn't work for a lot of people. Like it's just like,
Hmm.
and but what that looks like in practice, like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the number of women that I know in their late 30s and early 40s who just like prioritize career or dated a bunch or never settled down for one reason or another, and then that's their life now. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
we got to figure something out. There's too many people that are unhappy with what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just, I think, good to recognize that it's a problem and think
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think there are a lot of women in that position. And after the conversation I had on Monday, when I was reflecting back on that, where I was talking with well, I was talking with four women. One of them is a mom, but the other three have not become moms. And thinking about the reasons why they never felt they were safely situated to do that. And that I did have kids, and I had kids young, and then I had kids a little bit older, two different marriages. Both marriages fell apart, and both times I was left holding the bag. And so
Right.
there were challenges and difficulties with it. I'm so glad I have my children. It's the best thing I've ever done is be a mom. But the there were points in time when it was so hard and so thankless. And I looked out at other people who were doing something different, and I would have wanted to have been doing that. And can I really blame someone for not wanting to take that risk and step into the position where you might find yourself unsupported and having to be responsible for other people's little lives? And uh, I can't really say I blame them. So
Well,
something
that
needs to
that
shift.
highlights like the fact that like the norms are so unstable around
Right.
it. Seems part of like why like if you want to make the leap to doing this, you do need to be in a unit. Like you do need social norms enough around the unit that it seems workable
Yeah.
to do it.
Social
And
support and maturity.
yeah, and like yeah, and that there's like the number of like I mean I've talked to women who are like, yeah, I'd love to be a stay-at-home mom, but like I don't want to be dependent on some guy and then he leaves and then I don't have a career to fall back on.
Mhm.
So like there's this and then it can become self-reinforcing and then they prioritize their career and then that impacts the relationship and it's like I think it's like really easy for these things to death spiral.
I think so too.
And it's like it's also just really clear to me though that the conventional feminist thinking about this stuff is just really dumb.
Mhm.
I think it's just like their reflex is to just always blame men for everything, and the solution is
Mhm.
just to insult and discriminate against men, and they really have nothing else to offer. It's like there's not really a thoughtful, nuanced
Mhm.
vision that thinks about men and thinks about what's really workable. Like
Mhm.
if relationships aren't staying together, like that's the men's fault. If women can't have a career and a kid, that's the men's fault. Like it's like there's just something like it's just so I think that discourse is really holding us back because
Mhm.
that's a discourse that can only make people hate each other and
Yeah, it
fight.
makes people really furious on both sides.
Yeah.
It's that, and I'd welcome a deeper conversation about that if you want to do that at some point. I'd welcome that because I think that that's complex. I think there's a lot there. I think there are a lot of women who do feel functionally abandoned in their relationships after having kids with a man, especially when they see that their husband is addicted to pornography and that's so common. I mean, I hear this all the time from friends and clients and people that I in family, and it's such a common thing, the sense of functional abandonment within relationship and the sense that I think that we have in our modern life this idea that marriage is going to be everything. Like your partner is going to be your soulmate, your best friend, your romantic partner, your helpmeet in every way. You're going to share all the roles. That's a lot of pressure to put on one relationship. And maybe it's worth striving for. Maybe that ideal is really worth having, but we have to kind of recognize how much pressure we're putting on that other individual. And where at different points in the cultural timeline, we might have had some of those things fulfilled from other relationships. I think people have moved, especially in America, people have moved far from family, from extended family units, and that also puts a lot more pressure on marriage. And how that impacts men and women is going to be, it's going to show up differently and manifest differently. It's worth talking
100%.
about.
All I'm saying, just as like, all I'm saying is that whatever the solution there is,
Hmm.
it just has to take the whole picture into account. It needs
Yeah.
to think about the stresses on men and women
Hmm.
and what a sustainable like paradigm would be that works for both. And I think the problem with the social justice worldview is because it only cares about the protected groups and these specific groups that it cares about, and the other groups it's mocking or insulting them or
Hmm.
attacking them. That's the thing that just has no hope of solving any of these problems. Like they are very challenging. And I don't want to pretend that I have the answers to this stuff, but like it's like they're incredibly challenging and complex. Um, but I do think that we can understand them better and come up with better systems.
I think that's the best takeaway, what you just said there. It is true, it's holistic, and these kind of thinking that you can just nudge one variable or criticize one thing and not look at the whole thing as as an interlocking system
Right.
is short-sighted and silly and doesn't help. So
Sure.